Nothing like a good quest. So I've now caught Onward, which I watched with my kid. She'd seen it before, but I hadn't, and she got through most of the movie without without talking to me about what she thought about it because she'd already seen it once before. So this one, I wasn't entirely sure what I'd think about this going in. I mean, the first thing is, I don't put Pixar on a pedestal the way a lot of people, especially my age, do. People who have blinders on and seem to forget, things like The Good Dinosaur and the fact that Brave isn't very good. And I've never thought Pixar was bad. They've just never clicked with me as consistently as they do with other people. Every now and then they knock it out of the park, but there's a lot of their stuff I'm like, it was good, and everyone else says it's the best thing ever. Now, that wasn't the reaction that was to this, so I thought, okay, so does that mean I'm going to be let down by it even more than I sometimes am by Pixar, or does it just mean that it's really not going to hit it for me if people, or will it be a positive thing, because maybe it won't be overhyped? So this is a bit of a mixed bag. Here's what I'll say broad strokes. I feel like the relationships between characters and the emotional beats are solid. They work and they function and they pay off well. Honestly, it's the setting and the world building that feels, for want of a less incendiary term, lazy. So I'm down with the initial starting premise that this was basically your classic fantasy D&D style world, but that, magic was so hard to do and so few people could do it, that was eventually overtaken by the conveniences we know. Electricity, Wi-Fi, cars, why should you be tiring yourselves out, beating your wings when you just hop on a motorcycle? So I'm down with that as your starting premise, and it makes a pretty decent amount of logical sense to me. The problem becomes, and where it feels a bit lazy, is that the world that has resulted is basically the world as we know it, and with just like a sheen, a very superficial implanting of some fantasy elements on it. Like in the suburbs, houses are shaped like mushrooms. Okay. But, cars are still like normal cars, and it's, there's a freeway and there's gas stations and people have iPhones, and, it's kind of the bright thing. And not that I ever watched that movie, but knowing how little the fantasy elements were integrated and basically just slapped on the world as we know it made me lose a lot of my interest in that. And there's a lot of that going on here. And if you want a comparison, so if you were to compare this to, say, Zootopia, a big part of what makes that a really fun world to dwell in and spend time in is it feels incredibly well thought out as to how you would actually have to build someplace like that to accommodate all the different kinds of creatures and animals that live there. So you think about Zootopia, you think about, things were built at different scales for different size animals. Things were accommodating to, this temperature or that, and it feels like the entire world as presented to us was designed with what the different needs of these different animals was in mind. Whereas here, there's no accommodations made. And it really jumps out at a few points. The one that really jumped out at me is there's a centaur, and we know he's a centaur. He's a character we've met before. And he's getting out of his car. And I remember thinking, I wonder how they make cars more workable for centaurs, except his back end was basically just squeezed in the back seat, and he just kind of very awkwardly has to get out of the car. I'm like, really? You've got entire species built differently from standard bipedal, but every car just is built for bipedal humanoids? Really? Or the sprites on the motorcycles, which doesn't bother me as much because I could headcanon that because they're trying to do the whole rebel biker thing that they would have taken on something that wasn't built for them just out of spite. So I could headcanon that, but it falls under the same category. There's nothing built to accommodate things this big, even though they're all over the place. What? So that's what I mean by lazy. They use it basically as an excuse to have to be able to have a quest narrative in a modern setting where no one's going to be questioning, hey, where's this magic? What's this doing? They get to skip over all that and just be like, oh, this stuff was real, and now we can just do it. So it feels very reverse engineered, which Pixar movies have a tendency to feel for me sometimes, but it feels like we want to do a quest story in a modern day setting, but we don't want to bog it down with, everybody questioning, wait, magic's real? Wait, this, wait, that. And so we wanted a background element. And that, it feels like they started from that and that's how they built this world. But because and again, this is all speculative. I have no idea how they came up with this idea and developed it. But if I'm right and they started from that, and that just means that they gave them their reason, like, oh, well, so it's just, everyone has pets. It's just instead of dogs, they're dragons, but they behave exactly like dogs. It just doesn't have the imagination and the integration of the concept into the world that I really would have liked to have seen, because it's an interesting enough starting premise that you could do something really creative with that setting. And they just kind of don't. And that was the big letdown for me. As I said, though, the character relationships and the emotional stuff, that works. I like with the brothers, they have their moments of butting heads. Naturally, you need that. You need the conflict. But what I like is that never takes the form of jealousy over the fact that one of them, the younger one, has the ability to perform magic, while the older one, who likes this stuff a lot more than he does, than his little brother does, he can't do it. And you would have expected that to manifest as a very sibling rivalry. Oh, I'm so jealous that you can do it and I can't. I'm the one who likes this stuff. It never does that. And that was nice. The moments that they butt heads feel very organic to the situation. And they feel pretty justified, given that character conflict can often be very contrived in these situations in order just to have the conflict beat happen at the points that, a screenwriting 101 textbook says they should happen. And it doesn't feel like that. The character interactions and the points at which they butt heads and they clash feel a lot more properly earned. Also, I wasn't sure how they were going to possibly pay off the dad in a way that felt like it was worth that entire time. And the way they did it, and I won't spoil exactly what was done, but that was good. That was really smartly done. It was sweet. It felt right. It was really good. That was good. And I like that there's this emphasis. There is a bit of a running theme of working with what you have, and that extends to, the family unit. Because you have Ian, who's the younger brother, very much pining for what he doesn't have and what he never knew, which was his dad. Now, his older brother, he doesn't have his dad around either, obviously, but he at least knew him a little, has a couple of memories of him. But by the end, there is a nice emphasis on, look, you have to work the family unit that you have and not be overly dwelling on the things that you feel you're lacking. And I feel like that especially at the tail end, that theme was pretty decently integrated by the closing end of it. But overall, it was fine. It was the emotional stuff that boosted it up. There were a couple laughs here and there. There were some decent jokes. If you're a D&D player, there are some fun moments as far as that kind of stuff goes. Like I like that they're fleeing a gelatinous cube, and they come across this stuff that it's this raised panels on the floor. It's very obvious, like you're supposed to figure out a puzzle to only step on the right thing. And the big brother goes, we don't have time for this. Just grab a shield and run. They just grab shields and run down and hoping that the shield blocks all the spears. Like, I like that. Like, I know what we're supposed to do, but screw it. Things like that were nice, like especially if you are or have been a D&D player, but it doesn't fully mitigate my disappointment with just how uninventive the world is. It's our world with fantasy bits sprinkled over it, and it really should have been rethought from the ground up to account for what a world developed by these fantasy creatures would have actually looked like. And it doesn't do that. It's still worth seeing, I think. Like I said, the emotional stuff's solid. So that's Onward. You've seen it. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, go on. Drop something on down in the comments and let's talk about it. You know the things, likes, the subscribes, the share the video around, Patreon, blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about it, though. Relax, chill out. We take it easy around here, and you can come on back next time you need a break.